This episode is presented by the Visit Cedar City Brian Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Brian Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center, dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. It provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production, and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Welcome to Explore Local Podcast. Today we have Aaron Starks, who is the president and CEO of 47G, which is essentially the Aerospace and Defense organization for the state of Utah. So Aaron, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be in Cedar City. Cold Cedar City.
It is cold today. Like we were talking earlier, it went from summer straight into winter this year.
Yeah, it does that in Utah, doesn't it?
Yeah, but we had a nice long summer weather, actually. Clear into October, and then all of a sudden it was gone.
You know, I love the mountainscape just east of where we're at right now, because as you're looking towards Cedar Breaks, that red rock with the white snow caps. Yeah. It's just such a cool contrast, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually one of the appeals for my wife and I coming here, was just all the outdoor stuff that we could do in addition to career opportunities and everything. Yeah. It's just so much to do, tucked into a lot of beauty here that we have going on. So
fortunate to live here, aren't we?
Yeah. Utah in general is a great place, a hidden gem that's becoming not so hidden over the last few years. And right. Cedar City is no exception to that. So, well, Aaron, let's first talk a little high level.
Okay.
Tell our audience what 47G is, what you guys do. What's the elevator speech on 47G as people are trying to know and understand what you do for the state and why you exist?
Yeah, well, no, great question. One thing we all know as Utahns is the sound of jets.
Yes, that's very true.
I grew up in northern Utah. One of the great blessings in my life, I grew up in a small town, Huntsville, and it was a very common occurrence to hear an F-22 or an F-15 above Ogden Valley where we lived. And that's because of Hill Air Force Base, right? And then you kind of zoom in on Hill Air Force Base. What is Hill Air Force Base? Well, it's a contributor of about $11 billion to our economy every year through MRO, sustainment programs, incredibly complex military installation. They're right at the, crossroads of Davis County, Weber County, a lot of things happening inside the gates, obviously doing great work. Outside the gates, we've developed this whole economy of companies, small, mid-market, huge companies like Northrop Grumman, who have, do $80 billion in revenue a year, and have invested in the state of Utah doing the Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles program here. That work is all happening in Utah. It's incredible. So Hill Air Force Base has really been the anchor tenant for this industry to get built. Now it's 20% of our state's economy, 600 plus companies, 300,000 jobs.
All throughout the state.
Yeah. But Hill was kind of that anchor in the 1940s, a sustainment center. It's just grown. We have 13 military installations statewide, a growing presence off the Wasatch Front too with the NSA. And so people started to look at Utah, said, wow, they've got the largest test and training range in the country right there west of Salt Lake. They've got Hill Air Force Base. They've got all of these interesting companies doing things. And then in the 40s and 50s, Thiokol came.
Right.
Thiokol competed with Hercules. They started building solid rocket motors. rocket motors that were necessary for defense applications, for commercial applications, for NASA, as we did a test and training. And, Thiokol obviously grew. And then we started to grow further south, and then we get to Cedar City.
Mm-hmm.
And we started attracting great companies like American Pacific.
Right.
American Pacific recently, sold $700 million acquisition, but just 10 miles west of where we're having this conversation right now is American Pacific's property. You can drive out there. It's very remote, very rural.
Mm-hmm.
And you go take the tour, and they're manufacturing ammonium perchlorate, big barrels of it. It's solid rocket motor propellant. They're one of 2 organizations in the whole country. The only other one is Northrop Grumman, but that's a recent development they've made. But for decades.
Yeah, I think American Pacific's been here. Well, I think it was, for the locals, it was WECO is what everybody referred to it as before. And I think it's been 30 plus years that they've been here.
Yes. You go and put your hand in these barrels of ammonium perchlorate, and it's like really fine white powder dust. And they put that into solid rocket motor fuel, and that creates the propellant. And they're part of everything happening commercially. SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA, they're all, working with American Pacific. And so, look, it is an awesome industry. 47G is the industry organizer. We're more like an economic development organization at this point. We represent industry. We interface with about 200 companies. We're trying to help companies access more capital, talent, workforce. We're trying to put Utah on the map in a new way where more investment can be made into companies here. And we love our partnership with Cedar City.
Yeah. And so Cedar City and Iron County, we're a member of 47G.
Yep.
And today, you and I went and visited one of your staff members. We visited American Pacific, Lime Precision, RCS Rocket or Aerotech.
Yeah.
And we chat a little bit maybe about those guys as well. SUU, Southwest Tech. We even went out to New Era Manufacturing to kind of look at the specialized manufacturing that's going on. There's a lot going on here in Iron County and Cedar City that can capitalize on this larger initiative within the state. And what a lot of people don't recognize is that a lot of this has been going on for decades, as you referred to with American Pacific, right here in Iron County.
Right.
And so an organization like 47G is so essential to connecting Iron County to manufacturers or international companies that could, help create partnerships with our existing manufacturers or even bring in additionals, which is part of the initiative of 47G, right, is to create more of a hub for aerospace and defense. Do you want to maybe touch on that a little more?
Yeah, no, that's a great transition. The mission of our organization is to make Utah the nation's premier ecosystem for aerospace and defense companies. Now, what is an ecosystem, right? That's broadly defined. We define an ecosystem as having 4 key pillars. One is industry. 47G is convening industry in a way that's never been done, maybe anywhere in the country. 200 companies, the largest defense contractors in the world, are getting in the room together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, that's really cool. Downstream from that, you have small and mid-market companies that are getting in the room, participating on contracts with them.
Mm-hmm.
That dialogue is really important. At one of our meetings recently, we introduced 2 companies that we felt like would be relevant for each other's business models. We just found out a week ago, they've just signed an agreement for $5 million over the next 3 years. And it's like, well, that's awesome.
Right.
Proximity matters, right? So industry is the first pillar. 2 is academia. We look at Iron County, for example. You've got a growing population of companies that are doing big things on the national, international stage in aerospace.
Yeah.
Those companies run on talent. People, control processes govern organizations. It all starts with talent. We have to work with universities, colleges to ensure that we have the right talent to overcome any challenges with supply chain, logistics, freight forwarding, innovation. It's all better helped in partnership with academic institutions. Huge pillar. Southwest Tech is an amazing institution here. If you're ever evaluating Iron County and you want to know, hey, I've got a drone application that needs to be developed, go to Southwest Tech. They'll get it done really, really quick. You want to become a helicopter pilot and you need training, certification, you go to SUU. 10% of the nation's helicopter pilots comes right here from SUU. Like, what a cool thing, right?
Yeah. Matter of fact, you can hear our airport in the background right now as you're speaking.
Oh, there it is right there.
Yeah. Yeah. We're our studio right here is right next to our airport. And it's interesting that you say that because Cedar City was recently recognized as, let me make sure I'm getting this correct, and somebody can correct me if I quote this wrong, but we're the third fastest growing college town in the nation.
Oh, interesting.
And so, Southern Utah University is a D1 school, and then we've got Southwest Tech. And within proximity of the Southern Utah region, we have Utah Tech, and so we've got a lot going on down here. And so, having that educational component of, I think you said the 4 pillars, right, is essential because it's part of that pipeline. Yeah. So I'll continue.
Well, no, and I'm being long-winded, but industry, academia. The third is, look, for Utah to continue being competitive, government needs to partner with industry. And we do that really well here. Number 1 economy in America, fastest growing. We lead the nation in SBA lending per capita, which is a testament to the ability we have to support entrepreneurship here, right? 330,000 small businesses. Iron County's doing a great job of that. We need to continue creating policy that incentivizes more investment to come into the state, that helps current companies be incentivized to continue their growth here, right? All of that is best helped as policymakers and industry executives come together and talk about the broader economy.
Right.
We do that really well here. That 4th pillar would be professional services. Now, going back to American Pacific, I manufacture all of the solid rocket motor propellant. That's great. I've still got to ship, transport, transload, the export compliance, all of the services adjacent to that company are really important for industry.
Right.
We have gone out and we're identifying, vetting partners all the time that can help our companies grow their businesses. Mm-hmm. And so we're ecosystem building. It's not easy, but it's necessary. We've made some great progress over the past 2 years. We're starting to plug in with other states and regions throughout the country who want to do what we're doing, and we want to help them because at the end of the day, the thesis for our work is national security. Like, all these companies are important to our national security and supply chains. We help them, we help protect our nation, and we're all about that. Yeah,
that makes sense. And quite honestly, it just feeds into the economy, better jobs, better wages. That's going to help as a whole. One of the things that I really enjoyed today when we had that roundtable with, Line Precision and Aerotech and American Pacific and SUU was, we took the time, you took the time to say, hey, what are the hurdles happening right now? And how do we get over those hurdles? So one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and some of our industry partners here mentioned, a hurdle that they had was trying to attract those skilled, like, engineers or skilled professionals that aren't necessarily from Utah. They said from Utah for sure, because people in Utah, they know what Cedar City has to offer. But trying to bring those skilled people here and say, here's why you want to live and work and, to be cliche, play here. Yeah. And so, it's good to be able to have those roundtables, to have an organization like 47G to bring these industry partners together and say, hey, what can we do to better connect? And some of the discussion that we had, and it was awesome having SUU there, because SUU said, well, hey, we can tap into our alumni, both those that have graduated and recently, and those who have been graduated for a while. And so the value that brings to the area, to me and to our companies here, because we do, and no matter where you go, you have companies that are trying to make it work, and they're always eyeing, as they should in business, is there a more efficient way? Is there a more efficient place? Right. And so we want to make sure that anybody that's located here or is looking to locate here says, hey, this is where we want to be. Okay. So, so let's let's dive in a little bit. You talked about you have 200 different partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we say aerospace and defense, which is a huge focus, or the primary focus, but that includes aviation, general aviation. It includes advanced manufacturing.
Right.
So two things here. First, maybe talk about, maybe highlight some specific partners that 47G has that shows the range of company types or sizes. Mm-hmm. So first touch on that, and then I'll get to the next part.
Yeah. Aerospace and defense is a very broad industry.
Yeah.
One way to look at it is, you've got aerospace, which encapsulates space exploration, commercial aviation, defense aviation, obviously counter UAS, drone technologies. It's basically anything that flies.
Uh-huh.
And then on the defense side, you've got cyber and intelligence. You've got ICT technologies, IoT, really a lot of the deep and emerging tech that surrounds that space as well. Mm-hmm. Some renewable energy. And again, taking a step back, we work really close with the Defense Innovation Unit, with the Office of Strategic Capital, with the DoD. They've announced 14 technology areas that are critical to our national defense. So we kind of say, well, we've got all of that in Utah. And so what does that look like? Well, start at the northern half of the state. In Logan, you've got Space Dynamics Lab. They've designed and deployed more satellites into space than any organization in the world. They're also hosting every year the world's largest small satellite conference right here in Utah. Incredible. A university-affiliated research center, partnering with the DoD, growing at an exponential pace, doing a great job, right? Then you kind of work your way a little bit further south. You hit Brigham City, and Northrop Grumman and Corinne has the rocket testing site.
Right.
And they're building centrifuges and fuselages, and they're, it's incredible. You go out there, they have the whole rocket garden. Every missile and rocket that they've ever built is out there, and you can go walk around it.
I love that rocket garden.
It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really, really awesome.
And you almost have to double take. Wait, did you say rock garden or rocket garden?
Yeah, I know. And to their credit, they've been able to retain those, and now the public can enjoy them. You work your way further north. Carbon composite manufacturers, Hexcel's North American headquarters is here. That's a company with $1 billion market cap. Albany Engineer Composites, Hypercomp, all of these companies. Utah is a mecca for advanced materials. Mm-hmm. Materials that don't burn up as they enter the atmosphere. Right. And that's really important as you look at an intercontinental ballistics missile program. Mm-hmm. As we're shooting things into space, orbiting the Earth, and then re-entering the atmosphere. All of that.
It's insane.
I know. And then downstream from that, we've got companies and organizations doing research on what's called rad-hard, radiation-hardened technology. So a microchip or a microprocessor that's going to govern the International Space Station, a satellite, a microreactor on the moon they're talking about.
Wow.
All of that needs to be all of those components need to be tested for high temperature, high pressure testing, and radiation testing. So rad-hard, radiation hardened technology, is the new thing. We're doing that here. You go down, Delta's fastest growing hub in the US, right here. Pilot operations training, cyber intelligence, right? Raytheon 10 years ago made a big acquisition here. They're obviously part of Collins Aerospace now, but intelligence. And I'm just going to highlight two more to give you a good sense of the scope of companies.
Yeah.
Taurus Technologies, right? Raised a $65 million round here. Just won Invention of the Year through
that's what I was
Time
just going to say.
right?
Yeah. Let's repeat that again. Invention of the Year from Time Magazine.
From Time Magazine.
A Utah company.
Yeah.
Nate, right?
Nate Walkinshaw.
Yeah, Nate Walkinshaw. I mean, and this is a guy who started his career as an EMT.
Yep.
Who looked at the number one injury of EMTs was bending over to pick up those stretchers. And so on his own time, he engineered without the engineering background, as an EMT, engineered a stretcher, and I'm probably doing a horrible job at giving the layman's description, but basically a stretcher that would go up and down and save the backs of these EMTs, which I think is Stryker. Yeah. Yep. And he eventually sold Stryker. And he just has this entrepreneurial spirit. I got to talk to him at the One Utah Summit that was here, and I was just blown away. At first I was blown, and this is what I told him. At first I was blown away by these grandiose things that he's accomplished. But what blew me away more is the humble background that he had as an individual. And it really resonated with me personally. And him and I just kind of connected that way on a couple personal things. And it's just so amazing that, and he's someone that you can do that. You can go to this conference where you have people from all around the state. You just walk up to him and you have a casual conversation where, and we're talking someone
I know.
That's being recognized by Time Magazine. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I had to give Nate some props here.
Nate is a great entrepreneur. He's an even better human being.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about Nate. He's authentic. What you see is what you get.
And he's on the board for 47G as well, right?
He's on our board of directors. Yeah. And we're grateful for that. But Nate has developed this technology that some would call it a reverse utility company. Mm-hmm. But he's kind of found a way to decentralize the grid system, allow people to support the grid. The grid is an antiquated technological system, right? It
sounds like we're talking about Tron or something, the grid.
The grid, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, as we look at our national security, our ability to create enough power and electricity to support the future of aviation, the future of technology, we don't have it.
Yeah. It's true.
Power production lacks big time in this country. Where are we going to find it? Well, he's, through a flywheel technology, developed the ability for individual consumers like you and I to kind of get off the grid a little bit, have our own power source, which, my goodness, we totally need that. But also be able to help companies and manufacturers produce the power that they need to continue making products that are needed. So we have that in the state, but then, you go a little further down, Strider Technologies just announced their Series C round for $33 million. Now look, Walmart goes to Strider and says, we have 100,000 global employees. Our supply chains are sophisticated and long. We need to know who we can trust with our sensitive IP. They go to Strider. Strider, through web scraping technology, 4 billion points of data, can run every single employee through their profile, through their process, and it will tell them, well, this person worked for the Chinese Communist Party. That person, worked for Iran. You can't trust these people. Here's some recommendations based on the IP that you're giving them, what we would do, what we wouldn't. And it's an advisory service that they provide. And we're doing that right here in the state. So we run the spectrum with technology development here. It's a broad industry, but it all has a thesis for national security. Yeah,
that's really cool. I like what you're talking about with Strider. Just, again, it's another company that's doing some remarkable things in the industry. I mean, right now,
they really are.
With AI, talk about power usage, with AI and just security, cybersecurity. I feel like the more time that passes, the more concerned I become on, what information is out there, who has our information, how do we protect that information? Yeah. I mean, this is really quirky, but just the other day I was on my phone and all of a sudden everything in Google was in Japanese and something had infiltrated my phone and I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. And I know that's kind of a minor microcosm, but it really started because I've been pretty casual and I've thought, my goodness. And we hear quite regularly about breaches for major corporations and the ripple effects and impacts that it has. Yep. And so to have companies right here in Utah that are helping address some of these real world issues. And the one thing I want to kind of pull back from is talking about aerospace and defense. Sometimes it can be really daunting. In fact, matter of fact, I'm going to have you highlight here in a second the summit, the zero gravity summit that you guys just had, 47G. But I remember there was one panel that was chatting. And I remember afterwards, I'm like, boy, that just feels so daunting. Like, all these, international things regarding cybersecurity and defense. And you had military professionals up there. You had industry professionals. You had retired military three-star general, right? Remind me his name. I just don't want to get it wrong. Do you?
We had a few.
You had a few?
Yeah.
Just barely retired. I want to say, oh, this is so bad. Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was speaking to him afterwards, and him and I were chatting about it. It seems so daunting that sometimes we got to pull ourselves back and say, but look at the amazing things that we here in the United States are doing to get ahead, to be proactive in these areas, to protect against threats that are out there, if that makes sense. So on that somewhat drab note that I'm the one that went down that alley. Let's pull back, and then I want to get to about your Zero Gravity Summit. Tell me a little bit more about how did the concept for 47G start? What was the inception of that? I mean, you talked a little bit about how we've had stuff for a long time. Where did that come up with, and how did we get formed? Because it's only been around for about 2 years now, right?
Yeah.
And you've already grown it to 200 partners.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it get started? And maybe what were some of the fun hurdles you had to overcome? And then from there, I actually want to take another step back and kind of some of the history of Utah when it comes to aerospace and defense, which you kind of dabbled in a little bit there. But go ahead. Let's hear the story of how 47G got going. Maybe it's not as fun and as interesting as my mind is making it up to be. I don't know. Well,
it's been a journey.
Yeah, I can bet.
Founding a nonprofit is a really interesting experience from beginning to end. Selecting your board, selecting companies. Obviously, it's an entrepreneurial experience as well.
Was this one of your Was this your brainchild?
It was.
Because you were at the World Trade Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did it come up as you were at World Trade Center working with industry, saying, "Man, we got to do this"?
It did. Yeah. So local company, Fordham Technologies, doing good things within the defense world. Kind of said, "Hey, why don't you come over and help us with some strategy, but also to help finish off our Series A round." They were trying to raise about 20 million, kind of on the tail end of that raise, needed some help. And I said, "Hey, I'd be happy to do that." But at the same time I was having that conversation, others in the state were starting to talk about the need for an industry organization to be developed to help grow this industry, right? There was no convening, promoting, or advocating taking place for industry, although we've always known it's an important industry. We just
it's been here since.
And it's been here, right?
For decades.
For decades. Yeah. And I said, well, hey, I'm a patriot. I love the country. Grateful for the country. I've lived all around the world. I've traveled a lot, and national security should be important to all of us. And I just kind of knew once the conversations happened, like I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I know how I would do that.
Hmm.
And I felt like, I had this great opportunity, great experience at World Trade Center, Utah. I got to know the state really well. I said, well, I think I know the players. I know the model. I think I could do this. So I went to Fordham for a year, said, I'm going to help raise the Series A. And we did.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
And concurrently, I was building what was then Utah Aerospace and Defense. That was the name of the organization.
Oh, okay.
And one of the cool things about Utah is we're a really young state.
Yeah.
Right? 31 years old is the median age. And I love that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like aerospace and defense is awesome. I don't think there's a cooler industry in the world. It is the tech industry. It is, especially frontier technology. The technology being developed now will shape the way we live in 20, 30, 40 years from now, in addition to keeping our country safe.
Yeah. Well, and you were saying earlier today, what cooler invention is there than the airplane, right? Some may argue a helicopter, but we'll
but
let
an aircraft nonetheless, right?
Yeah, aircraft nonetheless. We'll let the aviation guys debate that.
Yes, let them have their moment. But I just kind of knew, hey, I've got to be the one to do this. I felt that it was a risk. I love the team at World Trade Center, and but I jumped, and I said, I'm all in on this.
That's so awesome.
So one of the reasons I did this is because, look, everyone understands aerospace and defense is important, but we don't sell ourselves well as an industry. We don't talk about our products in a compelling way.
Yeah.
It is,
well, historically, it's always kind of been like a hush hush. We're working on these military contracts.
It has
kind of mentality, right?
It has, and then
there still is some of that element that needs to be there, but
I guess being the industry association president, right? A lot of these companies are just really patient with me, right? I work with brilliant entrepreneurs who are far smarter than I am. But I go and I say, hey, tell me about your technology. And it takes them 10 seconds to get to a level where I'm like, my eyes are glazed over. I'm going, they let me push back on them. It's like, hey, the reality is what you're doing is really important and you need to be able to talk about it. And you can't. Yeah. You can't. And when I get on your website, I still don't understand what you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And I realize that some of this work is classified.
Sure.
And you're not a consumer product. You're not trying to get, the everyday person in Utah to just go buy something that you're selling. Like, I get that. But I tell you what, long before you shake hands with a contracting officer in Washington, D.C., they've looked at your LinkedIn profile and your website. Yeah. And if you can't talk about your technology, you're not going to get that contract.
Right. Yeah. If you can't put it in layman's terms, at least. Yeah.
So 47G became a brand.
Yeah.
We hired the folks that did the Jazz's rebrand. We were all in on that. We followed a great process. The beauty behind a branding process is not the aesthetic, right? It's not the logo. It's not necessarily even the name. It's the fact that you understand your audiences as a result of the process, if it's done right.
Although your brand is pretty cool. You go to your website and you're like, man, these guys are legit. That's how I kind of feel when I watch the video background and look at the cool logo.
That's nice.
On that note, explain 47G. People are like, what? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason we went with 47G, because it's captivating, but it's also interesting. People do want to know what it is. And, at the end of this process, we've kind of gone through, we understand our audiences. We're kind of honing in on a name. We meet with the firm we hired and they say, hey, we had a wild thought we want to share with you. And we're like, okay, yeah. And they're like, just out of curiosity, do you know the most amount of G-forces ever experienced by a human being? I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, I watched Tom Cruise and Top Gun too. And they're like, well, it turns out in 1952, the border of Utah and Arizona in the desert there.
That's right.
Colonel John Stapp strapped himself to a rocket motor, went down a 3,500-foot track, 652 miles an hour, experienced 46.2 G-forces. We have the video on our website. And you're looking at it. It's like, it's incredible. It got off with minor bruising. It's like, it truly is like something unreal.
Yeah.
And then they said, obviously, when did we settle the state of Utah? I said, well, that's 1847. They said, what if the brand is 47G?
Yeah. Round up that 46 point.
Yeah. Go where no man's gone before with the brand.
Beyond the 46.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But pay homage to our pioneer ancestors who made all this possible. And I said, that's it. And,
that's awesome.
And we loved it. And it's taken root. And we're just grateful to be here in the state of Utah. We love who we work with. I love what I do. More importantly, I love who I get to share the state with. Yeah. This is awesome. Utah's awesome. And, if you're a company watching this, for any audience, be all in on Utah, because I promise you, Utah will be all in on you, and you won't get that in any other market around the country. Yeah. I promise you, the way that you'll get it in Utah.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you highlighted that. And actually, you touched on some of the history I wanted to. So it's so organic, it's natural in the conversation. But, Utah, and I always tout that Cedar City epitomizes this, Cedar City and Iron County. Yeah. But Utah in general really knows collaboration. And 47G is a testament to that, of saying, hey, we have a need. We have something that we're really good at, have a great history at. Yep. And we need better collaboration and partnerships with this. And I always tout Cedar City and Iron County epitomizes that, because I've never seen such collaboration as I have here, where we have so many collaborative groups. Sometimes there's a lot of overlap in what they're doing. Yeah. And you experienced some of that recently. UAMI, consolidated with 47G because there was some overlap in what you guys were trying to achieve.
Right.
But I love that in Utah, the problem, I mean, you see silos no matter where you go. There's not to say there's not some silos in some industries and things, organizations in Utah, but really the story of Utah is collaboration.
It is. Yeah.
It just is a culture of collaboration to get things done. And why is that? It's because our real motivation, our real intent is the quality of life for people that live here. And I think that's why we see such an increase of people moving here to Utah, much to the chagrin of some of the long timers that have been here, seeing the landscape of Utah change a bit. And quite frankly, part of the reason why I live in Utah is because I like the outdoors. I like the elements of rural versus city that's going on. And I just love that sense of collaboration that we have here. And so building on what you're saying, to those that are listening, if you want to be in a place where there's collaboration, where you have someone like Nate, who we were talking about, who's just down to earth, and Aaron calls up Nate and says, "Hey, we got this meeting, this company that's interested." We come sit down and walk them through why Utah.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Yeah.
It is that easy in Utah to bring people together to get things done.
Absolutely.
Now, I love that you talked about that record. I was going to talk a little bit just about, and if there's any, fun histories that you know of, but I remember when I was living in Oklahoma 25 years ago, 20 plus years ago, there was this old couple that I met, and the husband had originally, they had lived in Utah, and he had worked for Thicol. And he told me about how he worked on, I'm positive it's Thicol, but he worked on parts for the dune buggy that's on the moon.
Oh,
and
cool.
he was so proud of that.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, my parents grew up in northern Utah, and my dad actually, he went to Hill Air Force Base to join the military, but the Air Force recruiter wasn't there that day, and the Navy recruiter was. And so,
really?
how diligent recruiters are.
Absolutely.
And so he ended up spending 20 years in the Navy, and I spent 20 years with him in the Navy growing up. I mean, he was on the original USS Nimitz. I remember when I was a kid, I got to fly to Hawaii and come back on a week and a half cruise on the Nimitz with him.
Wow.
And I remember the aircraft and the show that they did in the middle of the ocean, and then the homecoming, because they had been on a 6-month tour.
Yeah.
And the homecoming, and seeing from my dad's perspective and all these military men and women, their perspective of the family there waiting in tears, it was tremendous.
Yep.
And so when I think of 47G, I think of, not only my job in relation to aerospace and defense here in Iron County and how we're trying to, capitalize on that, but I think of my dad, and I think of growing up in the military, and I think of the protecting our country and loving our country and doing those sorts of things. Now, I guess to kind of wrap things up a bit, I want to touch a little bit on the future for 47G for Utah. Now, the governor has, there's two things. First, he's talked about five, what does he refer to it as? The 5 areas of 5 focus areas, right?
Targeted industry clusters. Yep.
That sounds so much more fancy.
Targeted
industry clusters. We'll go with that.
Okay.
Sounds like a breakfast cereal. Industry clusters, with post cereal. Sorry, Governor Cox, about that. But, aerospace and defense is one of those targeted industry clusters. And as part of that, there's some initiatives that maybe you can touch on regarding gearing up for the Olympics and beyond the Olympics, the future of aerospace and defense, and some cool initiatives that we're doing right here in Utah that we are proactively being the trendsetters for. So anyways, I really teed it up way too much for you there. So I'll let you dive into that. Thank you.
No, that's a softball. It is Utah's moment right now. And we need to be very deliberate. We're one of just a handful of cities, areas in the whole world that are being blessed by the Olympics for a second time.
Yeah, 2034.
Markets don't get that opportunity. we have a 10-year time frame to make policy decisions that will allow us to bring infrastructure in and further development. We can take a step back from an economic perspective and say, we're going to host the world. So what does that mean for our kids? What exposure, what public-private partnerships can we form to enhance our education? We had some of the Olympic Committee in our office last week talking about partnerships. And this is a really unique moment for the state. And look, whether or not we host the Olympics, there's a lot of great things happening here that men and women have contributed to and created for years.
Right.
Now, one of the initiatives that we're focused on at 47G that I'm excited about is we call it Project Alta. We branded that initiative. Alta standing for Air Logistics Transportation Alliance.
And a nice little shout out to
Alta,
the ski industry here. Yeah.
It was fitting for sure. We think that Utah could be the leader of advanced air mobility, moving people and cargo via manned and unmanned aircraft, hybrid electric air taxis.
Yeah. I call them like manned drones, essentially, or man-sized drones, right?
Sleek
air
aircraft.
Taxis. Yeah.
They're so awesome to look at. You can just sit and stare at one. They're just awesome. Rotor-based.
Yeah. Well, and what better state to do it in than where 1 in every 10 helicopter pilots is trained in the nation right here at SUU, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to throw in that
shout out to
plug.
Mike Maurer and the great work he's doing. I can't thank him enough. He's an asset here in the community for sure. But look, we're going to welcome the world to Utah, and let's put on a good display.
Let's make it so cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no better way to experience Utah than at 15,000, 20,000 feet, looking down at our mountains.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, here in Iron County, we do fly Iron County with our state legislators every year, where Mike and his crew takes those legislators and flies them over Cedar Breaks to show off how beautiful it is.
Oh, it is.
And
it is.
Not only highlight the outdoor beauty and the quality of life, but to show how that ties in with what I was, that cliche of live, work, and play, right? It's all about that quality of life.
We don't get to experience the birth of too many new industries.
Right.
Right.
Everything's been invented, or so it seems.
Yeah. And on the technology side, you could make an argument that, we saw a D2C business model come to fruition. Uber wasn't around 12, 13 years ago. Even Instagram and so we've seen some really cool things. I don't think we're going to live through anything that's going to be more transformational than air mobility. Walmart recently announced an exploratory process that they're going to run because look, they think that with their footprint here in the U.S., 90% of the U.S. population lives within a mile of a supercenter. And so they're saying, well, what if we leveraged our real estate for transportation? So creating vertical takeoff and landing pads called vertiports, installing them on the rooftops of all of our Walmarts nationwide, creating a network, and then hired an aircraft manufacturer, an OEM, to come in, and we could run our own airlines essentially. So, hey, I want to fly to South Jordan. I live in South Jordan, right? I want to fly from South Jordan to Salt Lake. I will call my Uber Lyft, or I will call my air taxi, piloted or not. They'll pick me up and I can fly right down to the supercenter in Salt Lake, get off, go down, get a drink, and call my Uber, right? As you look at Utah, you think, okay, well, our largest metropolitan area is Salt Lake City. Your 15-minute flight to Utah State and Logan. Your 12-minute flight to Ogden. 7-minute flight to Provo. 12-minute flight to Park City. 40 minutes to Moab. Think about that. Hey, the wife and kids, we want to get together. We want to go to Moab for the weekend. Well, good. I don't have to go spend 8 hours in the car with young kids screaming.
With all the stops and the drive.
And instead, I can pay whatever, affordable price, and I can be in Moab in 40 minutes and be back for work Monday.
Right.
The amount of possibilities that comes is really interesting on the passenger transport side, but on the cargo transport side as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And cargo transport, I think, is really some of the proving ground for the passenger side.
It is. Yeah, community acceptance, right? It's much easier to get behind a new technology if it's not carrying people at first.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this sounds cheesy, but I mean, being an 80s kid, I think of the Jetsons, right? There's George Jetson. He's getting out of his little flying car and it folds up into his suitcase, you know. And that sounds so absurd and like not a reality. But here's a good comparison. I used to think that watching like Star Trek, and they'd have their little tablets. And now how many tablets do we watch? My computer is a computer/tablet. And then today we were at New Era Manufacturing and we were seeing some of their equipment, and all the buttons they push aren't buttons. It's a screen. And when we were there, I thought, oh my gosh, it's like we're on the USS Enterprise here. Yep. They just tap those buttons.
Yeah.
And so the reality of air mobility is not as far-fetched as I think people may think it to be.
And I would even just say this, it's not far-fetched at all.
Yeah.
I've been to these OEMs, I've seen the aircraft, I've seen them fly, I've sat in them, I've done the simulations myself.
Wow.
Like the technology's here. Whether or not we capitalize on it, it's here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so this is Utah's moment.
Oh, I love it. I think that's a great way to kind of round things out. I guess before we conclude, what are some thoughts you have just in general about aerospace and aviation in Utah, and maybe how Iron County and Cedar City, how they play a role in that in the long term?
You know, everything is ultimately about community. And so I'm always thinking from an industry perspective. If I'm a manufacturer and I'm evaluating Utah as a prospective market, do I have people to make the company run? Absolutely, in Iron County. Do I have a collaborative network of stakeholders, university presidents, elected officials, sound economic development policies and plans? Tenfold right here, right? Is it a community that I can grow and scale with? Yeah, absolutely. You'll never find a more inviting community than Iron County. People who will literally wrap their arms around you, say, what can we do to help? Is it safe from an investment standpoint? Absolutely. So capital, workforce, obviously collaboration, you get it all right here. Thanks to your team, thanks to, all the work that's been happening. And the reality is we're an ambitious state. We punch above our weight in almost every category. We lead the nation in a lot of categories, right? Yeah. It's just who we are.
Right.
And so that won't change. We're going to continue to dream big. Companies should really think about Utah. I mean, really put some thought into coming out here, spending time. We just hosted Beta Technologies. And, Beta, maybe unlike any OEM anywhere in the world, is going to make air mobility a possibility. They came down and they were just astounded at what they found here in Utah because of who we are and what we're willing to do. And we mobilize quickly. You go to another market and tell me where you can get the university president, the director of economic development, elected officials all together in the same room,
industry partners,
and all of your industry, and convene all of those people within a week to have a conversation about expanding a segment of the industry.
Right.
And then have all of those people follow up, and you can't get that in LA.
Yeah,
you can't get that in Boston.
People like yourself from the state in association with the governor's office and everything. Yeah, you just can't. And I think that goes into, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me that plays into that ecosystem. So Utah has we have our kind of rural pockets, and we have our metro pockets. But we're all connected in this ecosystem that works together to make that possible. I mean, and then we leverage each other's ecosystems. So, I mean, Iron County's within a day's trucking of most major Western markets. We have 2 transload facilities with the Union Pacific Rail. And we have similar comparables to our friends up north in northern Utah. And we're connected through that I-15 corridor. I mean, there's just this ecosystem. I'm sorry, I'm adding and or stealing your thunder a little bit, but what you're saying is just so true. And it's hard to understand that on paper always. Yeah. But to come here and to see it, it's just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Come experience Utah with us. We'd love to have you.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, Thank you so much. President and CEO of 47G. We're so grateful to have you on the show today.
Thanks.
Yeah.